I played the perfect wife for years, only to find my husband and his family mocking me in a group chat, so I decided to become the villain they always thought I was. When I married Mark, I knew his family wasn't thrilled about me, but I thought I could win them over. I told myself it was just a matter of time. If I was patient, kind, and respectful, they would eventually see me for who I really was. I played the role of the perfect daughter-in-law, always polite, always eager to help. I brought desserts to family dinners, complimented his mother's cooking, and pretended to care about the stories his father told about the good old days. I ignored the small slights, the backhanded compliments, the way they exchanged glances when I spoke. It would get better, I thought. It had to. But it didn't. No matter what I did, I was always the outsider. His mother, Linda, had a way of making me feel unwelcome without ever saying it outright. "Oh, Mark always loved homemade meals," she'd say when I mentioned we ordered takeout after a long workday. His father, George, barely spoke to me at all, unless it was to comment on how, back in his day, women knew their place. And his sister Sarah was the worst of them all, sweet to my face but dripping with condescension. "That's a cute dress," she once told me, only to turn to Linda seconds later and whisper, "It looks a little cheap, don't you think?" I tried to tell Mark how I felt, but he always brushed it off. "They just need time," he'd say. "You're overthinking it." So I let it go again and again. I told myself I was imagining things, that they didn't mean to exclude me, that the inside jokes they shared at family gatherings weren't meant to make me feel like an outsider. But deep down I knew better. The forced smiles, the fake enthusiasm when I spoke, they tolerated me, nothing more. I started questioning everything. Was I really doing something wrong? Was I not good enough? Maybe if I dressed differently or cooked better, or learned to love the things they loved, they would finally accept me. So I tried harder. I learned Linda's recipes, I laughed at George's outdated jokes, and I made an effort to bond with Sarah. But it was useless. Nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. Then came the moments that were impossible to ignore. The time Linda forgot to set a place for me at Christmas dinner. The way Sarah never included me in family group photos. The way they all spoke about Mark's ex-girlfriend, Jessica, like she was some kind of saint. "She was just so kind," Linda would say, sighing dramatically. "And she fit in with us so well." It was always the same message over and over again. I wasn't Jessica, and that meant I wasn't good enough. Yet, despite it all, I still clung to hope. I told myself that families were complicated, that love required patience, that I could endure a few awkward years in exchange for a lifetime with Mark. He was my husband, my person, the one who chose me. Surely that meant something. But looking back, I realize how naive I was. Because while I was fighting to be accepted, Mark wasn't fighting for me at all. The final straw came on our 3rd anniversary. We were at a family dinner when Linda made a snide remark about how women these days don't even try to impress their in-laws anymore. I expected Mark to say something, to defend me, to shut it down. But instead he just laughed. He laughed with them like it was all some big joke. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. That was the night everything changed. I didn't say anything, but I felt it. A slow, creeping realization that had been building for years, finally settling in my chest like a stone. I was never going to be one of them. No matter how much I smiled, no matter how much I gave, I would always be on the outside looking in. And if that was the case, then maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to stop trying. It happened by accident. Mark had left his phone on the nightstand while he was in the shower, and as I reached over to grab my book, the screen lit up. A notification from a group chat popped up, one I had never seen before. Family first. My heart skipped a beat. I hesitated. I wasn't the kind of person to snoop, but something about it made my stomach churn. Why wasn't I in this group? Curiosity got the best of me. I tapped the screen. I wish I hadn't. The first message I saw was from Sarah. "Ugh, did you see what she was wearing tonight? So embarrassing." My throat tightened. Then Linda. "Honestly, I don't know what Mark sees in her. She's so tacky." The words blurred together as I scrolled. They mocked my cooking, my clothes, even the way I laughed. "She tries so hard," Sarah had written. "It's actually sad." I swallowed hard, my hands shaking as I kept reading. And then I saw Mark's name. My stomach dropped. He had responded. I prayed, begged, for it to be different. For him to defend me, to tell them to stop. But instead he had written, "Yeah, I know. She's a bit much sometimes. Bit much. Like I was some burden he had to endure." Felt sick. My face burned with humiliation. How long had this been going on? How many times had they laughed at me behind my back while smiling to my face? I sat there, staring at the screen, replaying every moment in my head. The cold glances, the whispered conversations, the way they always seemed to be sharing a joke I wasn't in on. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. They despised me. And Mark, my husband, the man I had vowed to spend my life with, let them. Worse, he joined them. The sound of the shower turning off snapped me back to reality. I quickly placed the phone back where I found it, my hands still trembling. My heart pounded in my chest as I heard Mark humming, completely unaware of the emotional wreckage he had just caused. Could barely breathe. How was I supposed to pretend everything was normal after this? How was I supposed to lay in bed next to him, knowing he laughed at me behind my back? I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake him up and shove the phone in his face, demand answers, make him see what he had done. But then what? Would he even care? Would he apologize, or would he just tell me I was overreacting like he always did? I didn't want to find out, because deep down I already knew. He wouldn't fight for me. He never had. So instead, I sat in silence, staring at the ceiling as Mark climbed into bed beside me. He kissed my forehead like nothing had happened, whispered, "Good night, babe," and turned off the light. My body felt frozen, my mind racing. I had spent years trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law. But for what? To be the punchline of their private jokes. To be tolerated instead of loved. That night, something inside me shifted. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't even sad. I was furious. And for the first time I realized, I didn't have to be the perfect wife. I didn't have to be their joke. I could be something else entirely. And if they already saw me as the villain, then maybe it was time I played the part. I woke up the next morning feeling different. Calm, almost detached. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself. There was no fixing this. No heartfelt conversation. No tearful apology from Mark would erase what I had read. His family despised me. And Mark, he didn't respect me. I had spent years trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I had none. That ended now. I could have confronted them. I could have cried to Mark, told him how betrayed I felt, begged him to take my side. But why? Why should I beg for respect from people who never even considered me worthy of it? No, they had made their choice. Now it was my turn. If they wanted me to be the villain, I would be. I wouldn't just accept the role. I would own it. The first step was simple: play dumb. I acted like nothing had changed. I kissed Mark good morning, made him coffee, even sent Linda a text thanking her for dinner. I needed them to believe I was still the clueless, desperate to please wife they thought I was. Because while they sat comfortably, thinking they had one, I was already planning my next move. I started small. I accidentally threw away Sarah's organic $40 face cream while cleaning the bathroom. I complimented Linda's biggest rival, praising her impeccable taste in decor at the next family gathering. I acted confused when Mark's father mentioned a story I had supposedly already heard, making him repeat it 3 times until he was visibly irritated. Petty. Absolutely. But deeply satisfying. Then I got strategic. I booked a luxurious couple's getaway for me and Mark. An expensive, all-inclusive trip to the Caribbean. And I made sure his family found out about it after everything was confirmed. "Oh no, we completely forgot to invite you guys." I gasped when Linda brought it up, feigning regret. "Next time for sure." The look on her face. Priceless. But the best part, Mark remained oblivious. He had no idea I was no longer the doting, eager-to-please wife he thought he had married. He was so used to me bending over backward for his family that he didn't even notice when I stopped. He didn't notice when I started subtly pushing them away, planting little seeds of discord that would fester over time. I wasn't looking for their approval anymore. I wasn't looking for love, acceptance, or validation. I had wasted years chasing something they were never going to give me. But revenge. That was something I could take. And I had barely even started. Revenge wasn't about anger anymore. It was about balance. For years I had played by their rules, smiling through the insults, pretending I didn't notice the exclusion, the humiliation. Now it was their turn. And the best part, they would never even see it coming. Because I wasn't going to scream or fight or beg. No, I was going to make them feel exactly how they had made me feel. Small, powerless, and completely unaware of the storm brewing right under their noses. Started with Sarah, She was obsessed with skincare, swearing by her $300 serums and rare imported creams. So I helped. Every time I visited, I subtly misplaced one of her products. Sometimes I replaced them with drugstore knockoffs. Other times I just let them disappear entirely. Maybe you left it at the gym, I suggested sweetly when she ranted about her missing moisturizer. Or maybe one of your friends borrowed it. Watching her spiral into paranoia over her vanishing skincare was almost too easy. Then there was Linda. She took so much pride in hosting family gatherings, always making sure everything was flawless, that she was the center of attention. So I flipped the script. Every time she made a dramatic entrance with a new outfit, I gasped, "Oh wow, that's so similar to what Carol wore last week." Carol, her biggest social rival. It didn't matter if it was true. The damage was done. Her face would twitch, her confidence faltering just a little each time. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. Mark's father, George, was more of a background player in their family politics, but I still had my fun. He prided himself on his whiskey collection, so I made sure to mix in a cheap bottle here and there, carefully swapping the labels. Watching him swirl a glass, trying to mask his confusion when his $200 single malt tasted suspiciously like a $30 knockoff. Priceless. The best move, though, was the vacation. After booking the luxury Caribbean getaway for Mark and me, I made sure to casually mention it to Linda. After everything was finalized. "Oh, we totally spaced on inviting you guys. You know how crazy life gets," I said, feigning regret. Her forced smile, her eyes flickering with barely contained rage. That was the real vacation. And through it all, Mark was blissfully unaware. He thought I had finally learned to get along with his family. He even thanked me for trying so hard. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. Because the truth was, I wasn't trying anymore. I was winning. But then, something happened. Something I hadn't planned for. Mark started to notice the tension. And when he finally confronted me about it, his reaction wasn't what I expected. Oh, Mark had always been clueless, but even he couldn't ignore the growing tension forever. "What's going on with you and my family?" he asked one night. His brow furrowed as he set his phone down. I shrugged, feigning innocence. "What do you mean?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "You've been different. They feel like you're pulling away." Pulling away. The audacity nearly made me laugh. As if I hadn't spent years desperately trying to be accepted. I stared at him, waiting, hoping he'd finally take my side. That he'd acknowledge how horribly they had treated me. That he'd say, "I saw the messages. Sorry, I should have defended you." But he didn't. Instead, he hit me with, "Why can't you just get along with them?" My stomach twisted. There it is. The final confirmation of what I had suspected all along. Mark wasn't just oblivious. He wasn't just spineless. He was complicit. I took a slow breath, gripping my wine glass a little tighter. I tried Mark, for years. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. He scoffed, shaking his head. "You're being dramatic." Dramatic. That word sent a rush of heat through my veins. I had sacrificed so much. My pride, my dignity, just to be tolerated by his family. And now, when I was finally done playing their game, I was the problem. I should have been heartbroken. I should have been devastated that my husband, the man who had vowed to love and protect me, was gaslighting me instead. But I wasn't. I was free. Because now, I no longer had to pretend. I no longer had to hope. Mark had shown me exactly who he was. And I believed him. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind buzzing. If I was truly the villain in their story, then I was going to play the part properly. And villains, they don't beg. They don't whine. They take. I reached for my phone and logged into our shared savings account. The balance stared back at me. A healthy little nest egg we had built together. I smirked as I initiated the transfer. Every single penny into my personal account. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to argue. I was simply going to disappear. But not before one final, perfectly executed act of revenge. The morning of my departure, I felt weightless. No second-guessing, no hesitation. Just a quiet thrill buzzing under my skin. I left the house before Mark woke up, suitcase already packed and waiting in the trunk. But I wasn't about to leave without a final, satisfying farewell. So, I grabbed a pen and a sticky note, pressing it onto his nightstand with a smirk. "Since your family thinks I'm only with you for money, I figured I should at least make that part true. I didn't change my mind. Not when I boarded my flight. Not when I landed in Rome, the warm Italian sun kissing my face. Not even when I turned on my phone to a flood of frantic messages. Where are you? What the hell did you do? Call me now. I didn't answer. I didn't owe him or any of them a single explanation. They had made up their minds about me long ago. Now I was just proving them right. Days passed, then weeks. Through mutual friends, I learned that Mark was in shambles. His mother was livid, spewing theories about how I had planned this from the start. His sister was still convinced I had stolen her beloved face cream. And Mark? He was drowning in regret, finally forced to explain to his family how all our savings had mysteriously vanished overnight. Apparently, that conversation didn't go well. And me? I was sipping wine on a rooftop in Florence, watching the city lights flicker below. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells, wasn't trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. I was free. Completely and utterly free. And the best part, I didn't feel guilty, not even a little bit. People always talk about the importance of forgiveness, of being the bigger person. But sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away. Not with a broken heart, not with bitterness, but with a glass of champagne in one hand and a first-class ticket in the other. Because if they were going to cast me as the villain, I was going to make sure I had the last laugh. And trust me, I did.